Hey guys, Brenny here with practicingdentist.com. I'm going to walk you through a quick little tutorial on some basic concepts on dental practice success and basically how dental practices operate, the fundamentals, the key components that go into a successful practice, a mediocre practice, a practice that makes money, and a practice that doesn't.
So let's talk about a couple different things. Number one is basic capacity and production relation. So in a dental practice, you have general capacity, which is kind of like your rate limiting factor, or your production limiting factor for how much your practice can do, basically outlined by your physical space. How many chairs do you have? How many staff do you have? How much can you actually fit into your practice? The bigger the capacity, generally the bigger the overhead or the bigger the expenses. So bigger capacity allows for bigger production, but it also allows for higher expenses. So the trick with the dental practice is to align your production, your ideal production, with your capacity. They need to be basically maxed out. So you want your production to be filling your capacity to max before you start adding staff, before you start expanding, building more chairs. You need to fill your capacity and you need to max your production. The next step in the formula goes through a funnel, and that funnel generally we can call your overhead or your overall expenses. So it's a funnel that kind of filters out the majority of your profit. So one of the things I talk about is related, all of these are intertwined, so I'm going to bring it up, is my idea of the 6 pillars of dental success. And each dentist is different, each practice is different, and I got sick of hearing that every dentist needs to have a $2 million practice and 8 locations to be happy, because that's just not true. So we need to take these into account before we decide what it's going to look like. And that has to do with income, the patients you see, the type of patients, the type of practice. So is it a partnership? Is it a big practice, has a huge capacity or small capacity practice? What about the location? Is it in the area you want to live? Is it in your ideal place for your family? Type of procedures. Is it allow you to do stuff you enjoy? If you're stuck for 30 years doing procedures you hate, you're not going to be very happy. So all of these are kind of intertwined. The patient type, location, practice type, all kind of play into also how you're going to get the procedures that you want to be successful or happy. And then 6 is freedom of schedule. Some people like more time off. They want more flexibility away from the office. They want to create a system that gives them freedom of lifestyle so that they're not so tied to their practice. And the key for me, what I preach or what I teach is efficient practices that have overhead controlled are generally going to have a happier dentist, because you're going to work easier for more profit. You're going to have less wheels spinning, less chaos, less stress for what you make at the end of the day. So that's the key. That's the reason why staying efficient and understanding these principles is so important. Because when you control your overhead, when you work for a good profit, when you work and see that actually 50% of what I'm making is going to my pocket versus 20, you realize that I don't need $800 or $1 million practice where my overhead's 60 or 70%, when I can have a $700,000 or $600,000 practice where my overhead is 50%, because the take home at the end of the day is the same. So whichever, there's not a wrong answer. It's just work smarter for what you're going to take home. So this picture here is my picture of the whole formula, basic production capacity formula. And this has to do with all the net dynamics that go into dental practice growth, running a practice, and your income profit at the end of the day. So I'll break these down one by one. So as we go through, you're going to see the basic production capacity circles, right? So production fits inside a capacity. You want your production to be close to maxing. That's your goal, is max your capacity. Capacity has to do with space, chairs, equipment, staff, and hours. So basically the constraints, the infrastructure of your practice. A bigger practice capacity means a bigger production potential, but it usually means higher expenses. So if you're growing a practice, a recommendation is to ramp up slowly. I mean, you don't want your capacity to be huge right away, because you're paying for that while you're trying to grow or build your practice. It's constraining your income, it's constraining your profit potential, because you have these higher expenses. So I'd recommend always try to keep your production and your capacity at manageable levels so you can scale up. If you're scaling production, and what happens in dental practice is we hit these plateaus, we hit these levels where our production meets capacity, and we're like, I can't make any more, I can't fit anything else in, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy to do anymore. So then we have to decide, okay, is it time or energy, or is it space? If it's space, then we're expanding, we're adding chairs. If it's time or energy, then we're usually adding staff. We're getting more efficient. Maybe we're adding different procedures so that we can increase that production as close to capacity as possible. But, when you make that jump into the next level over that overhead ceiling, all of a sudden you're getting bigger. You're adding staff. Your expenses are higher. So that next jump, it's harder to be more profitable unless you think about how you're gonna implement, how you're gonna execute that plan or that strategy, because all of a sudden you have more cost for what you're working on, your profit's going to be lower. So these ceilings are important in dentistry. Nobody really explained those to me when I was younger. If your capacity's higher than your production, you have room, you have slack in your practice, you have room to grow your production, and that's how you're going to increase profit. So what you want to do is max your capacity. You're going to look at marketing. And the reason why marketing in dentistry is so important, and I believe it's one of the most important things we can do learn as young dentists, because it's going to be the bedrock foundation for how we're going to get patients into our office. And not just any patients. What you want to do anytime you build a practice is get your ideal patient. Focus on who you want to see. And that goes back to dental success. Who's the ideal patient that you want to see? And also these patients, and that concept relates heavily to the types of procedures that you want to do, because certain patients want to do certain procedures. My dad's up in central Minnesota, small town, highest MA probably in the state. He doesn't have a ton of need for cosmetic or implants. He's not going to do a ton of Invisalign or implants. So know that the location you're at, the type of patients that you're going to see, definitely dictate to a certain degree what type of procedures you can offer. So I want patients that I love. I want procedures that I want to do. I want to create a machine, my office, my practice, the staff systems, the customer service, the patient experience that creates a machine that creates a steady flow of patients. That's why marketing is important. That's why brand building is so important. You want to get a steady flow of new patients that fill up that capacity. I mentioned that insurance mix and reimbursement. You're going to want to look at your fee schedule. You're going to manage your insurance mix. What are you going to take? What are you not going to take? Know what your price reimbursement is. Make a chart. I've got a practice fee schedule chart that goes through where I can organize all of my plan reimbursement so I can see who pays what. So I know if I'm getting close to my capacity and I want to start to filter and make my practice a little more efficient and profitable, I need to screen out the insurances that are not paying me well. If you're doing a ton of busy work, if you've got a slack, a lot of single fillings, you're going to have to learn to add in some endo, some implants, some surgery, some cosmetic cases if that's your thing, ortho and large pros cases. Elective procedures are really important. So find out what your practice ideal is, what your patients want, and start to deliver that to them. And then what you want to do, and the last part 5, is become efficient with your scheduling and your chairs, because if you have those high profit procedures, what you want to do is start to bundle procedures. I do CEREC, so if I'm doing a crown and the patient needs another filling, I'll do all of those in the same appointment. I do my crown, while my crown's milling, I'll bundle in another filling or two, or I'll take an impression for a bleaching tray when we're done. Try to fit in and be as efficient as you can, fit in as much as you can to each procedure. Be as profitable as you can with the time that you have. No holes. You want to figure out how to block out, how to get patients to show up for their hygiene appointments, how to stay efficient. Multiple hygiene ops. Usually that means as your practice grows, as capacity starts to get filled, production potential goes up, you're going to be doing multiple hygiene ops, multiple checks. So what's your capacity there too? Because a certain limiting factor is how much hygiene do you actually want to do, how much can you do? But definitely the most productive, profitable offices are doing multiple columns of hygiene. And use 1 to 2 chairs, or 1.5 to 2 chairs, as I mentioned before. Fit in your non-productive procedures or start a second column. That's the trick is, though, if your capacity is kind of level 1, you have 1 assistant. So they're going to have to be on their toes, bouncing from op to op, able to set up another op for you to work out of. and you start to get to your capacity limit because your assistant's going to start to get really stressed if you start doing 2 chairs with multiple procedures. So that's when you add in another assistant. And then you're kind of to the next level capacity because you just increased your overhead, your expenses. So then you have to be really smart about how you scale. So this is all about how you're going to scale a practice, how practices get bigger, how they get more productive, but yet stay efficient. That's the key, because a lot of practices just get bigger, but they don't get more efficient. So in the end, you're working harder for a little bit more income, which in my opinion isn't really the smartest way to go about it. And then get good at same-day dentistry. Patients come in, they have an emergency. Try to figure out how your system, your team, can work those into same day. Can you get the filling done right there? Can you at least start the endo? Work those things in, and you're going to see a big improvement in your production potential and your efficiency. So hopefully that makes sense, guys. So again, production, capacity, goes through the overhead funnel into profit. So remember the 6 pillars of success, and I'll break down in the coming videos or the coming tutorials some more insight into your overhead and some tactics and systems you can implement to make sure that your practice is profitable, efficient, and something that you really enjoy and love. So thanks a lot, guys. Take care.